Have you guys ever had this situation where you get into a routine where every day you're doing the same thing and you're driving in your car, you're going, to your errands and you go back and forth to work. But every time that you pass this certain place or a certain building, for a time, it's like something popped out of nowhere and you notice it every time that you pass by. Your eye goes over to it. But you're on such autopilot that you don't really think too much about it. It just becomes obvious the more that you pass by it, the more it's taking up residence in your mind. You have this certain feeling about something every time that you go by, and it's almost like the place itself calls to you, so much so that one day you have to pull over to check it out. And it's not that it gives you a good feeling or even a bad feeling, it's just something is drawing you to it. Well, that's what happened to me. Every day I would go, back and forth to work, and I never paid attention to it on the way over, but it had to do with something about it being, dusk and the sun going down and the light. The lights change everything. Even when we think about, seeing something in the daytime, and say, for instance, Halloween or what have you, you can drive down a certain neighborhood during the day and it doesn't look like much, but it completely becomes magical when the lights go on at night. Because all of the wires and all these other things, it doesn't look that good, but at nighttime, when the light has shifted and all the lights go on, you can see this theater of lights that just really changes everything. And so I think that's why I only ever really noticed it when I would come home. The sun would be going down, and every single time I passed by this old video store, I would look over at it and I would get this weird feeling. Like I said, it wasn't a good feeling, but it wasn't a bad feeling, but there was something drawing me into it, and the lights were this kind of ugly green. It's almost like sanatorium green, and this bright light on the inside. And it was wedged in between a kind of a weird section where there was a driveway going into it. So there was some alleyway parking, and then around the sides there was some parking. But it was kind of in the middle of an alleyway. And then there was parking on the outer edges on either side, but it literally, you had to walk into this kind of corner of an alleyway to get into it. And so I had been thinking about that. I passed it on one Friday night, and I finally decided, I got home and I wanted to, watch some movies or something. And I just got this inkling. I had nothing to do. I was by myself, and I thought, I'm going to go over to that weird little video store. Obviously, too, the other thing that's interesting about it is that there's a reason why a lot of people wouldn't go to a video store, because everything is streaming now, and even DVDs. I still buy DVDs, but a lot of people don't, because you can buy them on your smart TV and store them there. So a lot of this need to use DVDs and video players has gone away. But I have kept both of those. There's something kind of magical about having this piece of technology that allows me to store these time capsules that someday will be completely obsolete. And so, although I've had my video player right on top of my DVD player, I rarely ever use my video player. But something about the night, and just it had been like a month of me driving by and looking at it, and I don't know why I never noticed it before. I mean, it definitely did not look new. It looked like an old kind of piece of crap store, but it was videos, and I expected it to be like a Blockbuster. It's like this, again, a time capsule where you walk in and they're selling red vines and popcorn, and I just imagined it to be like an old school Blockbuster. And there was something in me that weekend, that Friday night, where I had nothing else to do. All my friends were doing other things, and I was just going to be by myself. So I decided that I would get in the car and go back over there, get some scary movies or something in video, and bring them back, and have kind of this fun vintage like weekend, or Friday night, I should say. So I got into the car and I headed on over. And by then it was dark out. So it was almost pitch black. I parked my car not in the alleyway, but on the left-hand side of the store. And one of the things that I noticed is it was just so desolate. There weren't a lot of people in that area, and there definitely weren't any signs of people going into this video store. And I wondered how long they could stay in business with having no traffic. Like on a Friday night, there's nobody coming in. How long could a company stay in business when nobody's going into your store or renting anything or buying anything? It just seems so desolate. But I had come there for a mission, and one of the first things that I noticed was how dark it was. They really had only one light on the outside, and it was like this bright green, ugly light that just shone down the opening. And the alleyway and the rest of the parkings around the sides of the building, it was so dark that it just seemed like that one light over the video store was being absorbed by the darkness. And I never really paid attention to the name before, but when I started walking up and getting close to the front door, I did look up at the sign, which was one of those old school neon signs, and it literally said "Lost" in really big letters. In this neon sign that was like pulsating, it said "Lost Video." And I thought that was interesting. An interesting name for a video store. But I walked up and I opened the door, and I heard the little bell on the door that rang to kind of notify the person or whoever was in there, to notify the workers that I had come in. And when I walked in, I saw one person at the counter, and they were reading a book and chewing gum, and it looked like, a teenager. And I said hello, and they said hello to me too, and then looked back down at their book. So I just started looking around the store. And literally, it did feel like being in a time capsule. It was really cool to just walk up and down the aisles and seeing, these bookshelves that lined the walls filled with videotapes, and just the way that I remembered it, from my childhood and growing up, where everyone would run to the video store and they would try and get their, the newest release, and they would run out, because you'd look at a bookshelf and see only the covers, left, and there was no videos, and you would be bummed because you missed out on it. So people would go early enough to try and get all the hot movies, before they sold out. And it was a fun time, because you could get everything that you needed in one spot. So as I walked through all the aisles, I just looked at all the movies and I just reminisced. And it just was a really interesting feeling to walk through that time capsule, to walk through space and time and remember what it was like when videos were the it thing. But as much as I was looking around, I couldn't see a horror section. So I walked back over to the teenage worker who looked up at me, and I said, "Where is the horror section? I didn't see a horror section, and that's what I'm here for." He didn't say anything to me. He just looked up at me and pointed a finger over towards an area where there was a drape, and it was towards the back in the corner. So I realized right away when you pointed that I hadn't gone over to that section, and I didn't notice it also because apparently it was behind a curtained wall. And I wasn't really sure why would that be separated, but I just thought maybe whoever owned the store was sensitive to, little kids walking around and seeing horror images, and maybe they were just trying to protect little kids from seeing images like that, and so they put it behind a curtain. So regardless, I walked over to the curtain area and I opened it up and I went inside, and to my surprise, there was no shelves or racks or anything like that. There wasn't a video in sight. What there was an elevator, and it said "to horror," and it had a sign that pointed down to the button to press the elevator. I thought that was really strange, but I guess if you ran out of space and you owned all the space, why not have it downstairs? So I thought, okay, this is interesting. I didn't know that they had a downstairs I wouldn't have even thought of that. I've never been in a video store or anything like that where they had a elevator that took you down below, but clearly they did. So I pressed the button for the elevator, and when it opened up, I got in and I pressed the arrow button to go down. Now, the interesting thing about it is it didn't show a floor or like a basement, or it didn't have any button like that. It literally just had a button that had an arrow going down. And so down I went. Now, you guys, this is where it gets really strange. And I don't even want to say that it's scary. It just was strange. When the door opened up, first of all, it went on where I was in there for way too long. And I started to get scared because, first of all, no one knew where I was. I didn't tell any of my friends or anyone where I was. I was just going to a video store. I didn't even think about that. And then when I was in the video store, only that one person who I didn't know saw me there, but I don't know who that person is either. And it made me realize how vulnerable we are, how trusting we are in so many situations, because I didn't know who this person was or what their intent was or what their life was like, or what kind of person they were. Were they a good person or a bad person? Were they connected to other people that were bad and they were just doing their bidding? As I'm going in the elevator going down, and it was obvious that it wasn't just one floor, because one floor, we've all been in elevators enough to know what going down one floor feels like. And you're kind of in and out pretty quickly. This went on long enough for me to start getting scared and to start thinking this way about how vulnerable I was, that nobody knew where I was and I didn't even know where I was going right now. But finally the door opened. When I felt that little bump that I had stopped, that the elevator had stopped, it made me feel relieved and again hopeful in a quick second. How you get hopeful, like, okay, it was just all my imagination, that you don't need to be worried about anything. It's almost like, your body tells you, oh, okay, it's going to be okay. You can stop like building up to panicking. That's what was happening with me. But then when it opened, it was really strange, because the elevator door opened up to water. And it wasn't just any water. It was a gentle water that was rippling. And there was a little boat right in front of it. And it was very dark. So it was like this darkness out on the water. Just imagine if you've ever been to Pirates of Caribbean, and the very beginning when you get into the boat and you go through that little section where you're passing the little cabins and you're passing Blue Bayou on the right-hand side, which is that restaurant inside of Disneyland or inside of Pirates of Caribbean. If you guys have ever seen that or been there, you know that feeling when you finally get away from the track and the loading zone and you're just out on the water and it gets really quiet where you can hear, the bugs and the crickets and whatever. That's what it was like, except that there were no visuals of a cabin. There was no restaurant on the other side, and hearing clanking or anything like that. It was quiet. And as I stepped out to look at it and look around to kind of get my bearings, I instantly thought, this is not good. I should just go back up. And as I went to turn around, the elevator had already closed behind me. The most scary thing was that there was no call button to go back the other way. So I was terrified. When I turned back around, this is when I really realized, okay, I need to pay attention to what's happening here. I got serious as a heart attack. I went up to where the boat was. So it basically left me on this little dock, and there was a little boat. It was very dark, but when I looked out again this time, I could see this kind of yellow glow start to emerge on the far side in front of me. And obviously there was nothing more for me to do. I had to get in the boat because going back the way I came was not an option. And I was scared as hell to do that, but what else was I going to do? Because there was no way for me to go back the way I came. At the same time, my mind is having a hard time understanding what's going on because this isn't possible. I don't know how many floors down below I went, but even so, this was an impossible place to be in underneath the bookstore. Not only because there was this river in front of me and a boat, but there was also sky. I saw stars. It was so dark I could see the stars out. So I got in the boat very carefully, and there were, what do they call them, oars to row the boat? I'm not a boat person, so I don't know. I think they're called oars. But I got in the boat, and I just started rowing towards where I was seeing the light. And I probably was rowing for a good 10 minutes or so. And I got pretty close to where the light was. The light was getting bigger, and I saw somebody come out of this door. Now, the thing that was interesting is that as I got closer, I could see the lights changing. And it was almost as though everything had a red and orange and golden hue to it. It was beautiful, actually. And I started to get a little less scared, even though what I was experiencing was impossible. Even the sky was showing amber hues the closer I got to this other little landing spot. And it looked like a little cottage made out of wood, covered with vines and flowers of red and orange. And as I got closer, I saw somebody come out, and I was still trying to make out, close enough to see what it was, but it was another person, and I could see that there were a couple of, almost where I would pull my boat up directly in front of it, and there were a couple of steps that led into the house. And it was just water and steps and a house. And I couldn't see the end of it it was shrouded, almost covered in vines and flowers and trees. And there were little sparkles of yellow light that were flickering on the other side. And I realized at a certain point that those were fireflies. The yellow of the lights around this little cottage house were flickering, and they were shimmering off the water. And somebody was over there waving me down. And I I couldn't make out. I was still too far to make out, and I have bad vision, so it was difficult for me to see. Even though I was closer, it's usually difficult for me to see close up when I'm at a distance. I mean, I have to be really close up to be able to get a clear visual on somebody. But this is where it got really weird. When I was about 15 feet away, that person that had come out of the cottage was me. And when I creased my brow because I couldn't believe what I was looking at, that person's brow creased exactly the same. When I smiled and waved, their actions did the same. Everything that I did was a mirror reflection of what I was doing in front of that cottage. It was a mirror image of me in some other type of time, in some other place. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to process this, and the boat just kept gliding towards the entrance. And as I got closer and was gliding up, and I looked down to see where the boat was going to come in, I looked back up, and the me that was in that cottage was no longer there. I mean, within a split second of me just looking down for a moment at the water and where the boat was coming in and looking up, the other version of me was gone. Now, you better believe that I went inside. This was turning out to be one heck of a Friday night, and it was horror in a different way than I expected. But at the same time, I would be lying if I told you that there wasn't something peaceful about it. Where I was impossible. I was not in some video store in some horror section. When I went down that elevator, I came out into something else. The door opened up into another time and space where I existed in some other realm, in some beautiful cottage on the water. So I got out of that boat and I tied the boat up to one of the trees to make sure that it didn't go anywhere. That was the last thing I needed, was the boat to not be there when I came back out. But I wasn't even sure if doing that was going to make a difference. But, you know, your brain thinks rationally, even in the most irrational circumstance. So I tied it. I went up the stairs that were lined with these beautiful little golden flickering candles and red flowers popping up all over the place, and everything was just this beautiful hue of like fall colors. It was gorgeous, gold and reds and oranges, and and the little fireflies that were dancing. And I did take a big sigh, a big breath, because I didn't feel scared. I felt like I could stay there. It was so peaceful and beautiful. So I opened the door and I went in, and it was a small little cottage. It had a cute little, everything was made out of wood. This little wooden kitchen with a wooden bench as a table, and there was a space where there was a living room, and it had one of those, huge fireplaces that you could put a cauldron in. And there was a chair in front of it, and there were books, and there was a hot bowl of soup on the table, and I could still see it steaming. The window looked outside onto the water at dusk. And of course, I walked into the hallway, and I walked into the 2 bedrooms, and I looked around, and I called out, "Hello," and there was no one in there. I had seen myself come out of there and disappear. So I assumed that that other version of me had gone in. But to my surprise, there was no one in there but me. And I was tempted to stay there. It felt like home. It felt like my bowl of soup sitting on that table, my chair in front of the fireplace, my books, my kitchen window to look out onto the water, my steps in the front, my flowers, my trees to tend, because of course we don't own nature. We're just stewards. And I wondered if maybe that version of me could only exist when I wasn't there, because I was the real version of me walking up those steps and stepping inside. And maybe once I did that, we merged back together again. You know, I don't know, but there seemed to be some sort of physics going on that I couldn't comprehend. And I wasn't regretting this experience. In fact, it felt peaceful to me, a peace that we only feel when we're kids and we don't have any clue about the bills we're going to have to pay, the things that we're going to go through in life as adults. We have such a short period of time in our life where we are completely oblivious to all of those things, and that's innocence. And when I walked in that door and I walked around that place, I felt like the innocence of me lived in there. And when I walked in there, I merged back with it again. Because when we're out in life, life is scary. Life is hard. We may have a home or a place that we live, but we're nervous and scared of losing things, and we're stressed while we're in these places that are to keep us safe. But our mind brings in all the stressors of the things we can lose. And we live with that every day. And that's the horror. So when I was in that place, I realized my mind was quiet. It was still. I was existing in a plane of innocence where my mind was completely free and I was actually present, not with having to try to be present. I was present. I wasn't thinking about any other moment or what I should be doing or what I'm going to do next or what I didn't do or guilt about things or nothing. And everything in me told me I needed to stay there. And as I walked up to the window one more time and I looked out of the window and looked at the water, and I remember taking a deep breath. And then it was like this hard jolt and this loud ringing sound that came into my mind. And I heard my voice talking, but it was like it was separate from me. And I said,
"Excuse me, can you tell me where the horror section is?"
And I was witnessing the young teenager who worked there point to the corner of the room with big block letters on the wall that said horror and showed shelves and shelves of horror movies. That I realized I was back in my own time, and that harsh ringing of the bell was another customer walking in. And I felt stunned and tried to play it off and said, "Oh, okay, thank you." And I walked in that general direction, but what I was really looking for was the curtain that led to the elevator, that led to somewhere else, to me, somewhere else in another place in another time. And there were no curtains leading to another room, leading to an elevator. There was only a wall lined with horror movies. And something inside me sank. And ever since that happened, and I drive to and from work every day, I look at that store and something in me wants me to turn into that store. And believe me, I have gone back many times because there's a part of me that yearns to go back to that place of innocence, but it was never there. That place never existed. There was never a curtained room. There was never an elevator. But part of me likes to believe that that me in that cottage, on that water, in that lovely day of fall, I'm sitting and I'm reading a book in my chair in front of the fireplace, and I am living my best life. And every single time that I drive home and it's getting dark and I look over at that lost video store and I see that green, creepy light in front and the darkness swallowing up whatever light it's putting out. And I look at that neon sign that says lost in red, and I wonder what it signifies. Was it my lost innocence? Was it my loss of peace? Was it that I found it, but then I lost it again? And I will search for it for the rest of my life. Thanks for watching. Hey, Spooky Review Club, let me know what you're thinking, and if you like this so far, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or leave a comment.